If loneliness were a disease, it would be one of the deadliest we know. And right now, it's spreading quietly through the lives of millions of older adults. Research shows that living in deep isolation can damage the body as much as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It shortens lives, weakens hearts, clouds minds, and yet, it's easy to miss until it's too late. We talk about diet, exercise, medications. But we almost never talk about the crushing silence that surrounds so many seniors. The phone that doesn't ring, the days without visitors, the meals eaten alone at a table meant for four. Loneliness isn't just sadness. It's a silent epidemic, and for too many older adults, it's stealing the years they worked so hard to enjoy. In this video, we'll reveal why senior isolation is more dangerous than most people realize, how it attacks both the body and the mind, and what steps anyone can take to fight back against it, starting today. Because no one should have to grow old in silence. When we think about threats to senior health, we often picture disease, injury, or frailty. But few realize how dangerous silence can be. Loneliness, for many older adults, has become an invisible force pulling at their strength, their memory, and their will to live. It doesn't arrive with drama. It settles in quietly, often after a loss, a move, or simply the slow passing of time as friends and family grow busier. John's story is all too familiar. After his wife passed away, the house that once buzzed with conversation fell into silence. At first, neighbors brought food. Friends called. Cards filled the mailbox. But months went by. The phone calls grew shorter. Visits became polite promises. We'll get together soon that never materialized. John, who had once led community meetings and organized Sunday dinners, now found whole days passing without hearing another voice. At first, he kept himself busy. He organized old photographs, fixed loose cabinet doors, tended the garden they had built together. He told himself it was enough. But days stretched into weeks. Conversations became rare, and when they did happen, John caught himself struggling to find the right words, forgetting details, losing his thread of thought. He didn't talk about it. He didn't want to burden his children, who had their own lives hours away. When they called, he answered with energy he didn't feel, afraid that honesty would sound too much like asking for something. He started speaking aloud in the empty kitchen, just to break the silence. He left the TV on all night, needing the sound even if the words meant nothing. At his next medical checkup, his blood pressure had spiked. He had lost weight. Sleep came in broken stretches, filled with restless dreams. When the doctor asked how things were at home, John smiled and said, "Fine," because explaining the weight of being invisible felt impossible. Loneliness doesn't always look like sadness. It can look like neat houses and polite smiles. It can sound like, "I'm fine," spoken a little too quickly. And while it hides, it does real, lasting harm. Millions like John are living in this quiet crisis every day, their world shrinking not because they choose it, but because no one notices fast enough. And loneliness is not just a feeling. It is a physical threat, cutting years off lives that could have been lived fully. In the next part, we'll see exactly how isolation isn't just emotional pain. It changes the body. It rewires the brain. And it leaves damage that medicine alone cannot fix. Loneliness doesn't just weigh on the heart. It affects nearly every system in the body, and its damage often begins long before anyone notices the signs. For years, loneliness was treated as an emotional burden. Today, it's recognized as a serious health risk, one that triggers real, measurable changes inside the body. When someone lives without regular human connection, the body enters a prolonged stress state. Levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, stay elevated. Blood vessels stiffen. Inflammation quietly spreads through the bloodstream, affecting the heart, the brain, and vital organs. Over time, these changes build a foundation for chronic disease. Research shows that chronic loneliness increases the risk of heart disease by nearly 30%. It raises blood pressure. It weakens the immune system, making infections harder to fight. It even slows the body's ability to heal from ordinary injuries. But perhaps the most devastating effects happen in the mind. The human brain is built for interaction. When days pass without meaningful conversation or stimulation, the brain's communication networks start to weaken. Neurons that once fired easily begin to slow. Focus slips. Short-term memory fades. New information becomes harder to process. Memory doesn't falter because someone becomes less intelligent or less interested in life. It falters because the brain, left without enough real interaction and stimulation, begins to lose its strength over time. Every missed conversation, every silent afternoon removes another layer of resilience. The parts of the brain responsible for planning, remembering, and adapting slowly erode. Helen experienced it firsthand. After her husband died, she withdrew from her church group and stopped attending weekly lunches with friends. At first, she told herself it was temporary, that she just needed time. But as months passed, she found herself struggling to focus on books she used to love. Simple tasks like balancing her checkbook took longer. During family gatherings, she sometimes lost track of conversations mid-sentence. Helen wasn't sick in the traditional sense. There was no clear diagnosis, no one moment when everything changed. But isolation had slowly rewired the way her body and mind functioned, and the effects grew harder to reverse with each passing month. Sleep patterns also collapsed. Without regular interaction during the day, Helen's nights became restless and fragmented. She woke up feeling more tired than before she went to bed, further draining her energy and resilience. Poor sleep, in turn, worsened memory, emotional regulation, and even physical balance, increasing her risk of falls and injury. Loneliness acts like a slow, silent toxin, undermining health in ways no one sees until it's too late. In the next part, we'll explore why so many seniors find themselves trapped in isolation, and why escaping it often feels harder than simply deciding to be more social. Loneliness rarely happens all at once. It builds slowly, often without clear warning signs, until connection becomes the exception rather than the rule. For many older adults, isolation begins with loss. The loss of a spouse, a sibling, a lifelong friend creates a hole in the daily rhythm of life that is not easily filled. Shared routines disappear. Inside jokes lose their audience. The spaces once animated by conversation turn silent. At first, most try to carry on. They tell themselves it's temporary, that reaching out feels too awkward or intrusive. They wait for invitations that never come, unwilling to seem needy or desperate. George was one of them. After retiring, he lost touch with many of his coworkers, the people he spent most of his waking hours with. At first, he made plans to stay busy. Woodworking projects, volunteering, meeting friends for coffee. But when a few friends canceled plans and a few more stopped responding, George hesitated. He didn't want to chase people down or impose. Better, he thought, to wait until someone invited him. The invitations never came. And over time, George convinced himself that maybe people didn't want him around anymore. He told himself he was doing others a favor by keeping his distance. Physical health issues made it worse. A lingering knee injury made standing for long periods difficult. Driving at night became harder. Even when he wanted to go out, the effort felt overwhelming. Technology offered little comfort. George's children often texted instead of calling. Video chats felt awkward. He missed real conversations, the kind where you could see someone's eyes, feel their laughter in the room. The longer George stayed disconnected, the harder it became to imagine reaching out again. What if people didn't remember him? What if he no longer had anything to say? The fear of rejection grew larger than the loneliness itself. Isolation traps seniors not because they give up on people, but because reaching out feels like an invitation for disappointment. Pride, fear, physical barriers, they all stack up, until staying home feels safer than risking another quiet refusal. And so they stay. And isolation becomes not a choice, but the only option that feels bearable. But the truth is, isolation is not a fixed sentence. It can be challenged, step by small step. In the next part, we'll explore how even simple actions can rebuild the lost bridges, and why small moves matter more than most people realize. Escaping isolation doesn't happen in one grand leap. It happens through small, deliberate choices, each one a quiet step back toward belonging. For seniors trapped in loneliness, the first challenge often is an opportunity. It's momentum. After months or years of shrinking into silence, the act of reaching out, even in tiny ways, feels heavy. But it's these tiny ways that start to rebuild a bridge. One of the most powerful first actions is reopening an old door. Reaching out to someone from the past, a childhood friend, a former coworker, a distant relative, can feel strange after so much time has passed. What if they've moved on? What if too much has changed? But connection doesn't always depend on a flawless shared history. It depends on the willingness to start again. When Helen finally sent a simple birthday card to her old neighbor, someone she hadn't seen in almost 2 years, she didn't expect much. A week later, the neighbor called, laughing about memories Helen had barely remembered herself. That one conversation became a coffee meeting. The coffee meeting became a weekly tradition. The relationship wasn't perfect. There were awkward silences and moments where Helen struggled to keep up. But it wasn't silence. It was movement back into the world. Rebuilding connection can also happen by stepping into unfamiliar spaces. Not necessarily far from home, but far enough outside the routine to meet new faces. George, who had all but given up on old friendships, found himself sitting alone one Thursday afternoon at the public library. He didn't come for a specific event. He just sat near the reading tables where others gathered. At first, he didn't speak. He listened. He watched. It wasn't dramatic. But the small comfort of being among people doing ordinary things helped him remember that he was still part of a larger world. 2 weeks later, a librarian invited him to join a book discussion. He hadn't read the book. It didn't matter. He came. He listened. And for the first time in a long time, he went home thinking not about what he had lost, but about something new he could try. Sometimes, connection isn't about reaching far at all. It's about reshaping the habits inside the home. Turning off the TV during meals, making a point to call one person a day, sitting outside where neighbors pass instead of staying hidden behind walls. These are not grand gestures, but they reintroduce the mind and heart to the rhythm of interaction. Even physical surroundings can pull someone gently back into engagement. Helen began eating her lunch near a window that overlooked the street instead of at the kitchen counter where she faced a wall. She started waving at the same mail carrier every afternoon. At first, it was just a nod, then a hello. Then, one day, the mail carrier stopped for a real conversation. It wasn't friendship in the traditional sense, but it was a reminder. People still noticed her. People still cared. Momentum matters more than perfection. No one action rebuilds an entire life. But small moves create openings, and from openings, new connections can grow. Seniors don't need to fill every hour with social events or conversations. What matters is the steady reintroduction of choice. The choice to show up, to be seen, to allow small human moments back into daily life. It's tempting to believe that if relationships fade, the opportunity for new ones fades too. But human connection doesn't run on a clock. It runs on presence. George didn't feel less alone because he joined a crowd. He felt less alone because he put himself back into places where connection could find him again. And Helen didn't rebuild her social circle overnight. She rebuilt it with small risks. A card, a wave, a shared laugh over nothing. Loneliness grows in silence, but connection grows in motion. Even one small step today can be the thing that changes everything tomorrow. In the next part, we'll see why the fight against loneliness isn't something seniors have to face alone, and why helping even one person find their way back matters more than we realize. Loneliness thrives in silence, but it loses power the moment even one connection forms. Fighting back against isolation isn't just possible, it's necessary. And no one has to do it alone. The first step is understanding that reaching out is not a weakness. For many seniors, years of independence create a hesitation to ask for anything, especially attention. There's a pride in managing life without help. But connection isn't charity. It's survival. Helen used to think asking for company would be admitting failure. After all, she had built a life where she took care of herself. Why should she suddenly need anyone now? But loneliness isn't about failure. It's about the natural human need for contact, a need that doesn't disappear with age. When Helen finally said yes to an invitation from her neighbor, she realized that allowing others into her life wasn't a burden. It was a gift for both sides. Fighting back also means recognizing that connection isn't about quantity. It's about quality. George didn't rebuild a busy social calendar. He didn't suddenly have dozens of friends. But a few consistent, real interactions changed everything. A weekly conversation at the library, a short visit with a neighbor, a monthly lunch with his son. These small anchors gave his days shape, purpose, and something to look forward to. Consistency matters more than variety. Loneliness shrinks when relationships, even simple ones, have roots. And those roots grow strongest when effort is mutual. For family and friends, supporting a senior through loneliness doesn't require grand gestures. It requires showing up, reliably, genuinely, without treating the interaction like a task to check off a list. A 15-minute phone call every week. An invitation to a family dinner. A drop-in visit just to say hello. Small patterns build safety. Safety builds trust. And trust reopens doors that loneliness had sealed shut. It's also important to create chances for seniors to contribute, not just receive. Many older adults carry decades of skills, stories, and wisdom. When they are treated only as recipients of care, their sense of purpose erodes. Programs that allow seniors to mentor younger generations, volunteer, share skills, or even simply participate meaningfully in group activities reinforce their value, not just to themselves, but to their communities. Helen found unexpected renewal by volunteering once a week at a local thrift shop. She didn't lift heavy boxes or work long hours. She greeted customers, folded clothes, and laughed with the other volunteers. It wasn't strenuous, but it reminded her every week that she still mattered. George, encouraged by his son, began leading a small woodworking class at the community center. Teaching others not only gave him structure, it rebuilt his confidence in his own voice. Participation creates connection, and connection restores identity. Fighting back against loneliness is not about making life busy. It's about making life meaningful again. Sometimes the steps feel small. Sometimes they feel forced at first. But over time, they rewire the heart and mind to expect interaction, not isolation. Communities can do more too. Simple changes, like creating senior-friendly public spaces, offering transportation options, and designing events with older adults in mind, signal that seniors are not invisible. They're welcome, needed, expected. Small gestures make a difference. Asking a neighbor if they want to join a walk. Offering to drive someone to a gathering. Simply acknowledging someone's presence instead of rushing past. These are not extraordinary actions. They are the ordinary work of rebuilding a world where no one grows old alone by default. Fighting loneliness isn't just a personal battle. It's a shared responsibility. When we reach out, not just once, but repeatedly, patiently, sincerely, we don't just change someone else's life. We change our own understanding of what community means. The battle against isolation is one conversation, one invitation, one shared moment at a time. And it's a battle worth fighting. Loneliness is real, but it's not unstoppable. It takes root quietly, but it can be challenged with equally quiet, steady action. If you've been living with isolation, it doesn't mean the story is finished. Rebuilding connection doesn't start with major life changes. It starts with one message, one visit, one choice to step back toward others. Small moves matter. A call you've delayed, a neighbor you've been meaning to greet, a community event you've thought about attending. These are not trivial moments. They're the foundations of belonging. If you're supporting someone else through loneliness, focus on presence, not perfection. Regular conversations, sincere invitations, and reminders that someone still cares have more impact than grand gestures ever could. Connection is built, not wished for. It grows in everyday spaces, at kitchen tables, in neighborhood sidewalks, in quiet moments when someone chooses not to stay silent. There's no perfect time to start, but there's always time to make a choice. What's one real step you could take this week to rebuild connection for yourself or for someone else? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this video spoke to you, consider sharing it with someone who might need a reminder that no one has to face isolation alone. Thank you for being part of this conversation and for choosing connection when it matters most.